This episode of Harvey Brownstone Interviews is brought to you by the Harvey Brownstone Talk Show Blend Coffee, available at hollywoodblends.com. Everyone's saying it's the best coffee they've ever tasted. Why not give it a try and see for yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's guest is a beloved actor, producer, and director who has been immortalized for his unforgettable portrayal of Almanzo Wilder, the innocent and pure-hearted young man who won Laura's heart and married her on one of the most cherished and treasured television series ever made, Little House on the Prairie, which is celebrating the 50th anniversary of its debut in 1974. Our guest also appeared in the 3 Little House movies, Look Back to Yesterday, The Last Farewell, and Bless All the Dear Children. He also wrote, produced, and directed the 2008 video, Almanzo Wilder, Life Before Laura. And he produced and directed the 2015 video, Little House on the Prairie, The Legacy of Laura Ingalls Wilder. And in 2012, he co-produced the hugely popular PBS music special, Pause Fiddle, The Music of America. And yes, he and his co-star Melissa Gilbert have the singular distinction of having won the 2006 TV Land Award for the most memorable on-screen kiss, which warmed everyone's hearts and still resonates in all of our memories. But our guest has had a highly successful career that has gone well beyond his work on Little House. He co-starred in the TV movie Forever and the groundbreaking 1985 LGBTQ feature film Desert Hearts, and he's also remembered for his portrayal of Moondoggie, Gidget's husband, in the TV movie Gidget's Summer Reunion, which generated the TV series The New Gidget. And he had a recurring role as Buffy's father, Hank Summers, in the hit TV show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Our guest has also had a distinguished stage career, having appeared on Broadway in Into the Woods, which ran for 11 months, and he starred in West Side Story in a highly acclaimed tour of Japan. And if all of that weren't enough, he's had a highly successful career as the producer of the immensely popular interview program Prairie, which ran for 10 seasons on the NBC Golf Channel. And now our guest is releasing his brand new memoir entitled Prairie Man, My Little House, Life and Beyond. This is an illuminating, intimate, and poignant book in which our guest shares his personal journey of family, relationships, a diverse career, and the remarkable experience of being part of a legendary show which is so deeply entrenched in American pop culture. I am delighted to welcome Dean Butler to our show. Dean, thank you so much for being here.
Harvey, that's one of the most extraordinary introductions I've ever gotten. I mean, what a wonderful what a wonderful setup. I hope the conversation equals the setup.
It will surpass it. I guarantee it. First of all, congratulations on your book, which I really enjoyed reading. You said on the first page that you never thought you would write a memoir. So what finally made you decide to do it?
In 2021, as we were rising out of the pandemic, the 50th anniversary of Little House was really starting to come in to focus for me. And of course, that is taking place this year in 2024. Little House premiered on NBC on September 11th, 1974. And I started to think about the fact that Melissa Gilbert had written a book, and Karen Grassley had written a book, and Allison Arngrim had written a book, and Melissa Sue Anderson had written a book, Charlotte Stewart, Ketty Lester, Missy Francis, even our 2 infant girls on the show have written a book. Wendy Lou Lee has written 2 books. Jennifer Donati, and she was Baby Grace, and then Jennifer Donati, who played Baby Rose, has also written a book that was released earlier this year. Well, with all those women, I realized, well, no men in our company had decided to write a memoir. And so with the 50th anniversary and all the synergy that I knew would be around that event, I just thought this was the time. If there was ever going to be a time to do this, it was going to be around the 50th anniversary of Little House. And that's what I set out to do. I created a proposal, and my friend Mary McDonough, who played Aaron Walton on The Waltons, walked it in to the editor-in-chief at Kensington Publishers, and he called me the next day and made an offer. So that felt like kismet. I'm going to do this, and I stepped in, and here we are. We are literally a week from today. The book goes live. So I'm excited.
You wrote that you grew up in a family that focused on making other people feel comfortable. And as a child, you sometimes found that obligation to be a confusing burden. What did you mean by that?
I'm trying to think of what the confusing burden part of that was. And if I wrote it, I wrote it. And must be contextually, I had something to say there about that. But in terms of the manners part of it, that was manners, a way of behaving properly in front of people was a very stressed aspect of my youth. And what was nice about that, what's nice about manners, and I say this in the book very clearly, is that manners are designed to make everybody comfortable. It's a way of creating relationship where there is a graciousness around that connection that you're making that can then lead to all kinds of other things. But at least you're starting with some basics of communicating with other people that allow you to be at ease and can hopefully put other people at ease. And that was a very important part of my youth. And I will say, Harvey, that emphasis in my life has served me extremely well through my life. I have rarely walked into a situation where I didn't know, even if I was a complete fish out of water in terms of the people I was meeting, but I knew how I was going to behave. I knew how I was going to introduce myself. How other people would introduce themselves to me, I can't control that. But I knew how I was going to introduce myself. And I know in doing that, that says something. The way we connect with people says something about us. And people discern whatever they're going to discern about that. But I'm presenting what I want to present about me when I say hello to somebody for the first time. And I think that's very important. And I reiterate, it has served me extremely well in my life.
Now, Dean, your journey to becoming an actor started first with being in the school choir and then as an announcer for the school basketball games.
Right.
And you've always said that you do not have a poker face. Your face always gives away what you're thinking. So how did that affect your acting?
Well, I think it leads to certainly in front of a camera, I think it leads to a pretty honest presentation of who you are. And I think in front of the camera, that's really the best way to be. I don't think people can hide. You can hide from people. You can hide yourself on the stage because you've got that distance between you and the audience. In front of a camera, with the camera literally at times inches from your face, you can't hide anything from the camera. I don't think you can. Now, others may say, oh no, I can disappear into a character and be whatever. I mean, I think there is always a truthfulness that has to present itself in our work, particularly when you're in front of a camera, because the camera's looking right into your soul through your eyes, and it does see whether it sees the truth, and it also sees, audiences are able to see if you're not really being authentic. So it's nice to hide on us. You can hide on a stage, and I think we see wonderful performance. It's a much more presentational art, whereas working in front of a camera is a much more internal process. And your thought processes have to be, I think, really clear when you're working in front of a camera in order to be effective.
I find that so fascinating because many actors I've interviewed have said that they are nothing like the characters they've portrayed. But you said in your book that you believe actors are always playing some version of themselves, correct?
Yeah, and I stand by that. And I don't think that anybody can sort of dig down into their inner being and come up with something that has no connection with who they are. Now, there are people with very, it's interesting. I was, as a young actor, I was described, and I'll give you the contrast. I was described as white paint, and this is interesting. So it takes very little additional color. A drop of red in white paint, a drop of blue, a drop will change white paint to something else. There are other people, and so speaks to this sort of right out in front, who I am is who I am. So the changes, anything that changes is very instantly apparent. There are other people who are more gray and more muted in their overall personality, and it takes much more color added using a paint allegory to change that color. So for me, it's right out front. I think I can't hide really, and it's just, that's just me. And other actors may be able to hide a little bit better, but in the end, there has to be something authentic about the work that we're doing in order for it to be believed. We have to be tapping into something that's real for us. Emotional adjustments, substitutions, all kinds of things that actors do in order to make a circumstance real for themselves. And what comes out in the substitution should be real because you are responding to something. Here's an example. Very few of us are murderers in our lives, but we've all thoughtlessly killed a fly. We've all whacked a fly. We're all killers in that sense. If you can tap into the cavalier way, which you can swat a fly and kill it, you can play a cold-blooded murderer too, on the stage or on screen, if you can tap into that coldness that you can bring when you swipe a fly. It takes thinking about it, but we can tap into anything. We have access to every emotion, but I stand by the importance of authenticity and the fact that we only have our authentic selves to work with as actors. That's all we've got. That's our tool.
No, I think that's exactly why you've portrayed such sincerity throughout your career. In fact, you said that in almost every role you've ever had on screen, you've been defined by your relationship with the woman who is the star of the show. You are a very effective romantic lead. Why do you think that is?
Well, I'd like to think I was raised in a very matriarchally oriented family. Now, I think there are caveats to that casting. I have always been hired with a rare exception. I mean, Desert Hearts was a different thing where, a man in love with a woman who doesn't love him. Desert Hearts was me losing the girl to the girl, which for that character, was a very upsetting and, off-putting thing to have happen. So he didn't take that character didn't take that very well. But for the things, certainly with Little House, I was raised to be sensitive to women, to be respectful of women. No always meant no. There was no, in that sense, no didn't mean yes. No always meant no. And that was the appropriate for Little House. And for so many relationships in my life, that was appropriate. That was what was called for. And I think I brought that into the room with me.
You definitely did. Now, you joined the cast of Little House in season 6.
Right.
And as you know, there's been a lot written and said about Michael Landon. You described him as wonderfully talented, hardworking, and a man who could be warm and funny, but he could also be curt and aloof. Dean, I want to take you back to May 22nd, 1979, which was your first day of shooting as a member of the cast of Little House. You were 23 years old, and after filming your very first scene, you asked Michael Landon if it was good enough. And he said, "I've only been doing this for 20 years. How the hell should I know?" How did you react to that?
Well, the hell was actually something a little stronger than that. But I was stunned, actually. I just remember we had been laughing moments earlier before that over me nearly driving a team of horses into a tree on my first shot. But, less than 15, 20 minutes later, after shooting this first dialogue, I asked him that question, and the laughter in his eyes, the warmth in his eyes, just the curtain came down, and it got very pointed, and he said what he said to me. And, I was, fresh out of the box. I was brand new in the situation. He had hired me. I wanted to please him. And so I asked that question. The answer, I mean, I really wanted, in that moment, I sort of wanted the world to open up and suck me in and go away. I mean, I didn't want to feel that kind of energy coming at me. As difficult as that was, I came to realize later that Michael was, in his own way, and perhaps a little jarringly, was telling me with his comment that if he said cut print, it was good enough. So Michael didn't negotiate on performances. He didn't give people extra takes if they wanted another one. He really didn't. There was no negotiation with Michael on anything that you were doing on camera. I mean, if you did what you did, and if he liked it and said print, you're done. If he didn't like it, he would give you an adjustment and you'd go again. But if he said cut print, that was it. And I got that lesson in a very jarring way in the first hour I was on that set. And I think it colored, in all candor, Harvey, that interaction colored the way I worked with Michael, or the caution with which I worked with Michael for the rest of the time that I knew him, because I never wanted to get that ever again from him. And I think that, the simplest note for me that came out of that interaction was, don't ask questions. Now, I did ask questions later, but don't ask questions about performance. And certainly don't ask him to validate something you've done. He would validate it by saying cut print, and he would be more demonstrative than that, I came to know, when he really liked something. There was no doubt. When he was happy, he communicated that, and you knew that. I had not experienced anything like that before. And admittedly, I was very inexperienced when I got Little House. And, the directors I've been working with were either, in my university environment, or later in commercials. Obviously, a movie of the week for CBS, which was a beautiful, supportive director who was so gentle and kind and understanding in his approach. So it was safe to ask that question. He could deal with my insecurity. Michael didn't want to have to address and cope with insecurity. He had other things to do. I did get that lesson, but it did color the way I dealt with him for the rest of the time I worked with him for the next 5 years.
Well, I can certainly imagine that. When I read that in your book, it struck me that he was speaking to you in a form of shorthand. What he really wanted to say was, if I say cut print, I'm telling you it's okay. Don't bother me with feeding your need for reinforcement and validation, because I don't have time.
And Harvey, that is exactly right. I mean, that is, in fact, what he was telling me. I wish he just said that.
I want to tell you, when we had Karen Grassley on our show, when her book came out, she had some rather uncomplimentary things to say about Michael Landon. And so I was very interested when you said in your book that Karen endured a high level of disrespect on the set. What did you observe that was so troubling?
I think, look, Harvey, I don't want to I don't want, I did say that. I think this was a man's world that we were in. As much as our specific show was very feminine in its orientation in terms of Melissa Gilbert being young Laura, Karen being wonderful mother, Melissa Sue Anderson being Sister Mary, the Greenbush girls as Sister Carrie, the Turnbaugh girls as Baby Grace. I mean, there were a lot of female presence on that set. But I think Michael grew up in a time in the industry where, men were men and women knew it. And I think we have evolved beyond that point. And look, there could be a lot of questioning about whether that's valid, whether that's important, but we have evolved. And I don't think you would go on a set today and hear any man, producer, director, or other. I mean, yes, you do hear things, but it's not, men do not have a green light to treat women disrespectfully on a set today. And, Melissa Gilbert's talked about this. Obviously, Karen wrote about it. Michael was a man of a different time. I think that, the things that I noticed, the things that I found, and it spoke right into my upbringing, where I was raised to be respectful of women. The language that was used, the tone of the jokes that would happen, the jokes that were designed to be at a woman's expense. I mean, that's what the jokes were. There were a lot of those jokes on our set, and there was a lot of laughter. And I will say, to be fair, women on the set would laugh at some of those jokes. I knew that those were jokes for me personally. And this, again, is just me personally. The kinds of jokes that I was hearing were jokes that never would have been told in my family growing up. We were not Puritans. I mean, there was salty language. We had substance issues in my family. There were a lot of things, but women were treated with respect. Women's voices mattered in my family. And look, Michael had a very different upbringing than I did. I know he did. I mean, and he talked about it. Michael had a very difficult relationship with his own mother, who was, the way he told the story was pretty rough, and perhaps not as loving as she might have been. And I think
that's definitely will scar a person for sure.
Yeah, I don't think you can. You can't go through experiences like that when you're. I mean, I've written about experiences I've had in my youth that have colored me and affected the way I have dealt with people through the years. Michael had some of those too. I think on the upside of that, Michael could have turned out, and Karen has said this, by the way, in an interview I did with her some years ago for DVD bonus content. And Karen talked about the fact that Michael, with his upbringing, could have turned out to be many different people. And some of those people could have been very, very dark. I mean, really dark. Michael turned what was a challenging upbringing he focused his desires and interests on camera in the storytelling that he did, on uplifting families, uplifting parents, uplifting relationships between parents and children. I think that was primally important to him. How that came out off camera at times, not all the time, but at times, could be a little surprising, how he would say things. But what his goals were with the programming were crystal clear. And the fact that there are people all over the world, and we meet fans we meet people who have loved Michael and loved Little House through the years. And Michael, look, was just voted. The Today Show this last weekend for Father's Day did a contest of the great TV dads of all time. Michael Landon won, was voted by the audience as the greatest TV dad in television history. He was an incredible TV dad. There was much more to Michael than what the audience saw. But what he wanted to do, he did. What he focused on in his work, he did exceptionally well. And that work has stood the test of time. I mean, here we are celebrating 50 years of Little House. So, there's a yin and a yang to all of this. But nothing that I'm talking about can detract from what Michael achieved in the programming that he made. He did exceptional work that is beloved by generations of people. And there's no sign that that's going away, because he touches something in his storytelling that is fundamentally human. It's primal. It's good when you see it. And I think that's the motor that was driving him to do. He wanted things to be good. He wanted families to function. He wanted people to talk to each other, to love each other. That was really, really important to him. And that's what he aspired to. And I think it's safe to say that that is what he achieved in his work. And, I say, Harvey, we were all incredibly fortunate to be there with him as a part of that. He was not perfect, but he was pretty good.
Oh, I think his achievements were monumental. And one thing about Michael Landon that is indisputable, he had great instincts. For example, he hired you to play Almanzo without any meet and greet or reading with Melissa Gilbert to see if there was any chemistry between the two of you.
Right.
And it turned out that Melissa, who was only 15, was not attracted to you. So if she had had a say in the casting decision, you would not have gotten the role, correct?
Well, that's certainly what my opinion that's been my opinion through the years. And Melissa and I have had lots of conversations about this through the years. It's one of the centerpieces of our relationship. It's this casting is what bonds the two of us together. We will always be connected to each other. And we are certainly better friends and colleagues now than we were 45 years ago. It wasn't possible I could be her coworker back then, but it would, anything more than that would have been inappropriate. And that's the way it had to be addressed. And I think it's interesting, in talking about Michael and what he saw and what Susan Sukman saw when I came in the door. Casting directors make decisions very, very quickly about people. As human beings, we all make decisions quickly. And I think you have about 8 seconds when you walk in a door to make an impression on somebody. And that impression we form a lot of opinions about people very quickly. And it's very hard to move us off of those opinions once we form them. And I say we form them very, very quickly. Melissa, jumping back to that, I think Melissa was looking for someone closer to her age to do this with. I'm not suggesting that Melissa was looking for a boyfriend in this situation. I don't think that that's what it was, but I think she wanted to be with someone where she was on a more equal footing with that person in terms of age and experience. But, when you read the Little House books and that story, Almanzo was 10 years older than Laura when they married. Now, the fact is Laura was 18 when they married. Melissa was only 15 when we were married on the set. That 3 years for Melissa in terms of life experience would have yielded a lot more comfort in dealing with what we were being asked to play together. But that said, Little House was so chastely done. And I think that's part of the romance and the beauty of it, is that it's just this very sweet, tender packaging of emotional life that is very accessible to people, and it is aspirational.
You really hit on something there, because there was an 8-year difference between you and Melissa. She was 15, you were 22. There could have been public outrage about a grown man being in love with an underage girl, but in my opinion, the public accepted the relationship because she pursued you, and you played Almanzo as a painfully shy, naive, innocent young man. I think that's why we all accepted the relationship. Don't you think?
I think absolutely. It's all wrapped up in that. Almanzo could never show interest in Laura until he knew that he was fallen for her. And then he was going to, his interest would be a very respectful, loving one. So there was never going to be, and you couldn't have, to your point, there could not have been a situation on a show like Little House where a 23-year-old man was pursuing a 15-year-old girl. It just, that flat out would not have worked for anybody involved. And so, yeah, I sort of kid, Harvey, that I was the object of desire, in that situation, completely oblivious to what was going on with Laura. And that was my job, was to be a shiny object that she could fall in love with.
Okay, so let's go there. Very soon after you joined the cast of Little House, you not only became famous, you became a bona fide teen idol and everybody's vision of the ideal man. You were a sex symbol. How did you, Dean Butler, how did you deal with that?
I don't know that I overtly felt that. I mean, I wouldn't have framed it for myself the way you're framing it. I think I certainly knew that dates came easier to me. If I wanted to go out with somebody, I could pretty much go out with anybody that I would ask on a date at least once. So I think it was an incredible time in my life. My family teases me about this, and Catherine, my wife of 23 years, teases me about, to this day, going off on events that I go to regularly, and certainly during this 50th anniversary year. And she always says to me as I'm getting ready to leave the door, "Well, you're going off to be adored again this weekend." And the level of affection that comes at me and has come at me for the last 45 years because of this character, more than anything else I've ever done, because of this character, is an incredibly affirming thing of, who wouldn't love that? Who would not love to feel that kind of affection coming at you? And I would say that for the most part, Harvey, during all these years, I have, for the most part, handled that responsibly. So I've had a wonderful time. I've had wonderful relationships. I've had some not wonderful relationships, but overall, as part of this character, it is just incredibly gratifying to have people look at you, talk to you, and you see it in their eyes. You see the sort of the giggly. They go back to women, women my age, women 40s, 30s, will come up to me and they are giggling like schoolgirls because I've never changed. I'm always the same. And they see me at whatever age they are when they first discover the character, but I'm always 23 to 28. I never change. So I reach into somebody's world at a very particular time in my life, and they have an opportunity to respond to that. And it's been incredible. It is really, truly, I say this, it has been, that kind of affection has been one of the great gifts of my life. And I'm very respectful of it. When I go out and do things, these events, it's very important to me, Harvey, that people come away from an interaction with me, knowing that the person that they watched all those years ago is the same person that's standing in front of them right now in this interaction that we're having. That's really important to me. That I think that speaks to my interest in, well, it speaks to my upbringing about being authentic and being decent and being kind. And that I can't imagine not behaving that way.
What it speaks to is your respect for the show and your respect for your fans, which is very, very commendable. Now, the last time you saw Michael Landon was at the gym, a year after you finished working together.
Yeah.
Dean, I want to ask you, if you had known during that chance encounter that you would never see Michael Landon again, what would you have said to him?
Well, after Michael was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, I wrote him a letter. I had no sense that Michael would invite me to come out and see him in Malibu, where he was resting and with his family. And he spent a lot of time with our producer, Kent McCrae, who was one of his closest friends. And he got thousands and thousands of letters from people all over the world. I just wrote him, wishing him strength and I mean, Michael had so much strength, and he had such a great way of looking at this crisis in his life, and he used it to positive good. I think I hope I would have been able to embrace him. I would have embraced him in that moment and wished him well and tell them that I have always been grateful for the opportunity that he gave me to be part of this wonderful program that we're all a part of together.
Did he ever answer your letter?
No, there was no answer to the letter, but he was getting truckloads of mail from people. I have no expectation that he would have answered it. And that's not why I didn't write it to get an answer. I wrote him to let him know that I was thinking about him. And as we all were, everyone was. It was a shock to get that news that he had acquired something that was so deadly that at that point in time, barely 3% of the people that were diagnosed with it survived it. Today, even, all those years later, Michael's been gone for 33 years this July. Barely 13% of the people who are diagnosed with pancreatic cancer survive it. So it is a virulent form of cancer, and very, obviously, with those numbers, very unforgiving.
That was a real terrible tragedy. Really a horrible tragedy.
No, totally.
I want to ask you, Dean, about your experience making Desert Hearts, which you've referred to. It was one of the very first feature films dealing with a same-sex relationship. You played Daryl, the controlling boyfriend and boss of one of the female lovers.
Right.
What was the experience like making that movie? Did you have a sense that you were doing something historical?
I knew I was doing something that was really being beautifully made. And this movie was made on a shoestring. Donna Deitch, who was the director of this movie, mortgaged her house to find the money to make this. And I don't think she went into making the movie with a distribution deal in place. I think that came later. So she really risked everything to do this. And I think that's what, we were staying in this little motel in Reno that was this divey little motel. It was perfectly fine, but it was not any kind of a fancy on location hotel that people get used to. But then on Little House, we stayed in very simple accommodations when we went on the road. So that wasn't such a big deal. What you got was there was a lot of commitment on that set to delivering for Donna Deitch, because people knew that she had leveraged a lot to make this happen. So I didn't really know what the impact would be. I mean, look, it was a very politically incorrect thing to say, but when I went in to meet with Donna Deitch and to do the movie, to audition for her, and she had not put scripts out. I mean, no one was allowed to read the script before they came in and met with her. You came in, you sat down, she said hello, you chatted, she told a little bit of the story. She asked if I had any questions. And I asked him what to me was a very honest question, but perhaps a insensitive question. But my question to her was, who's going to go see a movie about two lesbians? And instead of throwing me out of the room, she said, "That's perfect, read." And she'd given me some pages, and I read with that, like, who would care about this? And she hired me the next morning.
Well, I want to tell you something, Dean. I don't know how many people in my position have been able to tell you this, but I'm gay. I'm 68 years old pretty soon. And we're
the same age, Harvey. We are spirits at 68.
We are from the same generation. And I want you to know that I came out around the time that Desert Hearts came out. And I knew women like those women in the movie, and I knew men like you. And I thought you really captured that feeling of having your masculinity threatened perfectly. You were exactly portraying what I had seen with my own eyes, with people who were really living it. And it's really a thrill for me to tell you publicly that you nailed it.
That's very kind of you, Harvey.
And I'm very impressed by that director who saw something in the way in the kind of dismissive, contemptuous way you said, well, who's going to look at a movie with two
I don't think I said it contemptuously, Harvey, but
there's definitely.
But you could definitely read that into it.
No, absolutely. If you're a director of a movie about that, and somebody says, who's going to want to see a movie about that? There's absolute implicit contempt, and it was perfect for your character.
Yes, it was.
And there was an innocence in your asking that question, really honestly saying, like, is this commercial? Is anybody going to care?
Well, I think that's where the question was coming. It was a commerciality question, not a sociological question. Although I guess a commercial question is by definition a sociological question.
No, of course it is, because
it's all in there.
Of course it is, because the implication is there's no audience for this. No one cares. And it was perfect. And what you conveyed on the screen really helped people, because your emotional evolution in that character was something that many people were going through who had never seen this portrayed on screen before. And that's why I thought that very honest, innocent portrayal of someone going through this who could never fathom such a thing was very validating to a lot of people. And you deserve a lot of credit. It was nothing like Almanzo.
Right.
And, and then in your late 30s, you transitioned away from acting and into producing and directing documentaries. You were hired to produce the popular interview show Prairie, which ran for 10 seasons on the NBC Golf Channel. Right. Even though you were not a golf enthusiast, you had never heard of David Feherty, and you had never produced a talk show. How did that happen?
It does seem sort of unlikely, doesn't it?
A little.
I get it. Harvey, let me just say, as we proceed with this interview, you said to me this would be like an interview unlike any other I've ever done. I give you kudos for that. You are achieving that. So
I hope you're saying that in a good way.
Yeah, no, you're awesome. You're terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
thank you, Dean.
Thank you. And so I had been working with the executive producer of Prairie and in other sports environments as a producer for a number of years. It was a little more than 10 years I've been working with him. Yeah. And on and off at various things. And this gentleman's name is Keith Allo. He is just deeply immersed in the world of sports, whatever the sport is. I met him in motorsports, which is something I had also had no background in of any kind. But at the time I met him, I was working for a company that did coverage and documentaries for Toyota and Honda related to their high performance motorsports ventures. And so Keith met me as a part of that, and Toyota and Honda were both competing in the Kart FedEx Championship Series, which was a competition between Toyota, Honda, Mercedes-Benz, and Ford in open wheel racing. It was America's fastest, most demanding open wheel racing series. It has sort of devolved into IndyCar, but at the time it was way ahead of IndyCar in terms of what it was doing technologically. But Keith saw that I loved telling stories, and he also saw, I think he saw that I had an appetite to learn about things. I knew nothing about motorsports, but I became very immersed in it in through the work with Toyota and Honda. And then he invited me to produce a weekly highlight show for the Kart FedEx Championship Series that was going to air on ESPN. And so I was out on the road for 22 weeks shooting stuff and sending it back to Detroit, where it was edited and fed to ESPN. And the show aired every Monday night after a race on Sunday as a weekly highlight show. So I had a great time with that. And then I worked with Keith at the Olympics doing something that I absolutely loved, that was very much in keeping with what the kind of storytelling that I love. And I was producing for him Olympic Hall of Fame induction packages. These were like up close and personals that Rune Arledge at ABC made so famous during his time running ABC Olympics when that was going on. And these were just human profiles of people, of great athletes who did great things. And I really loved that work. And that experience was another bonding thing with Keith. And then when he went to golf, to NBC Golf, to be head of one of their heads of television, of programming, being executive producer there, I thought, well, I'm done. I mean, I'm never going to work with Keith again because I don't play golf. And it just didn't seem like that could happen. But when he called me in May of 2011 and just very pointedly asked me, would you like to produce a talk show? When Keith Allo called and asks a question, my answer generally is always yes, because it's always been a good experience for me. And he's an exceptional leader, a wonderful producer. He leaves people alone to do what they do, and he trusted me to tell stories. And I learned the talk show world, at NBC Golf. And this NBC Golf is part of NBC Sports. I mean, NBC Sports is the premier sports. They're right. There are a few peers with NBC Sports. NBC obviously has had the Olympics contract for many years now, and will have it until 2032 at least. Their ability to capture sports and tell stories of human interest is without parallel on television. So to be working inside that organization, because it is one large organization, was a gift. That was an incredible gift. And I got to work with incredibly talented, capable people. And I learned the talk show, the rhythm of a talk show, the structure of talk shows. And I got the opportunity to meet and get to know and work with David Faraday, who is a brilliant communicator. He was a wonderful golfer, a Northern Irishman, wonderful golfer, former Ryder Cup player. He had been a great broadcaster at CBS on their golf package for 26 years. And he was still at CBS when he came to NBC Golf to do this talk show. He left CBS to join NBC as a golf commentator halfway through his contract with Faraday. So he was inside then. But I learned so much about writing from David Faraday, so much about how someone asks questions, how someone connects with the guest. And I thought, with the acting background, I felt like I had something to offer there to help him in some of the things that he was trying to do on the program. He helped me by just making me a better writer, reading the things that he wrote, watching him on camera was an acting class in and of itself, in a way. He's just a very, very special talent. We did like 150 hours of this program over 10 years.
Can I tell you
Yeah.
why I think he was such a wonderful interviewer? He had an engaging personality. He made his interviews about his guests, not about himself.
Yeah.
He knows how to ask probing and compelling questions, but he can also be funny. So that's why I just think he
All of
was
that.
great. I'm just wondering, though, how would you compare the stress and the pressure of being a producer with the stress and the pressure of being an actor?
Oh, I don't think there's any comparison. I think the stress of being the producer is much greater. It's much greater because you have, as much as you're not on camera, and that has its own unique set of pressures, but that is the singular pressure of being the actor. The actor, in most situations, is the last one hired, the first one done. All the creative work is that sets up that performance that's going to happen has been done. The crew's been hired, the sets have been built, everybody's in place. The actor comes in and is dropped into into an entity, into a project that is fully formed, does the work, and goes home. And then those people who the project is being handed off to another group of people who are going to finish it, package it, market it, sell it, all of those things. As a producer, you get to be involved in all of that from start to finish. And that, for me, was the real excitement of the work, is to be able to be there when there's a blank page on my screen. I open up a Word document, there is nothing on that page. At the end of, depending on the amount of time I've got, and you make things in the time you have to make them. So if you have a month, you're going to use a month. If you have 2 weeks, you're going to use 2 weeks, but you are going to come out of that process at the end with something that wasn't there before. And you, as a producer, at least the way I like functioning as a producer, you're going to be touching that project at every step of that process. And for me, that's full engagement, full participation. I have the opportunity to influence outcomes. I mean, look, I know Michael Landon loved, he loved being an actor. He loved being famous. There's no question. But I think he loved the control that he had off camera as a writer, as a director, as a producer, far more than the control he had as an actor.
So let me ask you this. Your work on Buffy the Vampire Slayer was your last recurring role in a TV series, at least so far. And
Yes.
According to IMDb, your last acting job was in Crowley in 2008. Do you miss acting at all?
I really don't. I don't miss it enough to look. I think you've got to be, if you're going to be, it's like you can't be sort of pregnant. You can't be part way in, part way out. I think if you're going to attempt to work in this ultra competitive world, and it is an ultra competitive world with people who would give their right arm for an opportunity to work, you have to respect that. And I think people who are behind the scenes making decisions see that level of commitment. And I think they can also see a level of commitment which is perhaps not fully vested. I think if you're the producer, you're going to go, if I'm sitting in the producer's chair, I'm going to go with the actor who's fully vested, as opposed to the person who's just looking at it as a lark and something fun to do and a nice opportunity to maybe do something else in their career. Now, if that were to happen and someone saw a spark, got a spark from me and thought, oh, he could make a nice contribution to this and invited me to participate, I would be delighted to participate. But I think that to really be in this world, that world as an actor, you have got to be all the way in. And anybody, when you look at careers, Harvey, you look at careers, I look at careers that have had these long arcs, these long trajectories. None of those careers that we think of as these great careers would have happened if those people hadn't been vested in that career 1,000%, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. There's no part way to having a long, successful acting career. It's way too competitive, and no one's going to come chasing you, at least not for very long, if you want to step away. There is someone to take your spot, and they are ready and waiting for you to step aside so that they can maybe fill the void that you leave, if you leave a void at all. I just think it takes a lot of commitment to be in there. And so I am not burning with desire to act again, which I think would say to most people, well, then you're probably not going to act again. And it's fun to talk about, but I think you got to be all the way in there, or it's just people don't have time because it takes too much.
Well, if it doesn't feel right, then you shouldn't do it.
Right.
Now, Dean,
Right.
I know you're too humble to mention this, but I want to take a moment to acknowledge publicly that you played a key role in saving the Motion Picture and Television Fund's long-term care home when it was in danger of being closed. And I know it was out of character for you to be a protester and a bit of a shit disturber, but thank you for pushing yourself to make an important difference for many of our senior citizens in the entertainment industry. Bravo, Dean.
Well, Harvey, thank you for that. I know I did write about that experience in my life. And that was it was completely counter to who I thought I was at that point in my life. But when you see people whose lives are going to be fundamentally upended, and if it's a member of your family, in this case, it was my wife's mother who was a resident of the long-term care unit and was going to be removed, as all residents were. It was something that had to be responded to. And I think if I can say about what we did, what I would say about what we did is our efforts. Yes, we were ship disturbers. There's no question about that. But I think at our core, what we were successful at doing is getting the leadership of the Motion Picture and Television Fund to reassess their role in the promises that they had made to people historically. Admittedly, very challenging promises to keep, where when you say, we take care of our own, that's a big deal. That's a big promise to make. And we wanted to make them, remind them, bring into sharper focus for them again, that their effectiveness as an organization was contingent upon them keeping this promise, as challenging as it is. But you can't say we take care of our own and then not, and have anybody trust you that you're going to be there. So I think that we served a very good purpose, and we knew when we stepped into this that in the end, this would have to be management's decision to do the right thing. We were never going to twist their arm, or we were not going to get people fired. No one was going to be, yes, the CEO or the chief medical officer was replaced as a result of the action we took. But the people, the industry people, the icons of our industry who are the face of this organization, they had to come to the right position on this to do the right thing. And I think that's very quietly, with the support of a very powerful law firm, Girardi and Keese, we made the Motion Picture Television Fund see the long-term benefit of continuing what they had promised to do. And it's maybe on a smaller scale now than it was. It's not nearly as many beds, but the commitment is still there. And that's really important. And the need that exists for this service that they provide is only getting greater and greater as our population gets older. So elder care is an essential part of the life cycle that we all have. We are all going to need this care at some point. And it's wonderful to be able, or it's great to be able to have it at a place in an environment where you have been associated as a professional person throughout your life.
As I said, congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, as you know, your friend and colleague Allison Arngrim wrote one of the forewords to your book. She described you as having an iron determination to remain gracious no matter what the circumstances. Did that description surprise you?
No, because that's, as I said to you a few moments ago, I mean, that is my commitment. Now, I don't always achieve it. I mean, look, there are times when it's just been a long day and people keep coming at you. And so I can get perhaps a little short, or I want to clip things a little faster, but I never want to be rude to anybody. I'm never going to be. And if I am, I don't walk away from that feeling good at all. That leaves me with a really bad feeling. So, and knowing that I have that bad feeling about being rude in any form to anybody who has the graciousness to approach me and approach any of us, I think it keeps me pretty straight on all that. We've been doing these appearances together for 20 plus years, 30 years. We've been doing appearances together. I think we know who each other is, the other one is in these environments. I have massive respect for Allison and how she interacts with fans, and the wonderful way that she has harnessed this. She's made being sort of a snarky, evil person something that is beloved by people. And I think what makes that work, Harvey, and Allison, so you have a sense of this, Allison as a person, she has all of that bite with her humor, but at her core, Allison is one of the most thoughtful, kind, decent, empathetic people. That the presentation of all that is a little brassy always, but at her core, at her center, she's so good and decent. And I think people feel that about her. So they know everyone feels like they're in on the joke with her because they feel her goodness and they know what she's playing. And everyone has a good time with that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Now, over the years, you've done a lot to help honor and perpetuate the legacy of Little House on the Prairie, Dean. In addition to the documentaries I mentioned in my introduction, which you produced and directed, you also appeared in an episode of the PBS series American Masters entitled Laura, Ingalls, Wilder, Prairie to Page, which was the most watched episode in the history of the American Masters series. And you've made dozens of personal appearances at fan events. You were on the 50th anniversary celebration committee. You are absolutely an integral part of an important American pop culture experience. Do you think a reboot of Little House on the Prairie would work today?
I hope it does, because I think it's going to be essential for Little House to continue. I think it's going to have to be rebooted. I think what's challenging about that is that when the original is still so watched and so loved and thought of, it has such an iconic status with people. It's not just another television show. There are people for whom Little House is like religion. It is at the center of how they've learned their humanness. I think it's going to be a tough order to do it, but I think it's important for the life of the property that it does. That said, though, Friendly Family Productions, which is the owner of all the film and television rights, continues to be very supportive of the original series and all of us who were a part of it. So, we've had bumps in the road along the way, but I think as time has gone on, there's a mutual recognition that we are all in this together. And so but this is going to be their deal to make. I mean, if any of us are involved in something like that, if it were to happen, it's going to be some cameo situation where we might pop in and say, oh, look at that person who was this person. It'll be that kind of thing, I would think. There's been through the years, there's been lots of talk with people who say, well, wouldn't it be great to see where these characters are today and do something else? But that's much easier said than done. And I'm of the opinion that I think we really want to just leave it alone. I mean, we want it to stand as it is in this beautiful form that it has, and not cloud that in any way with some attempt to pick up the story or move it forward. I think when it happens again, it's going to go back to the big woods of Wisconsin, and we will meet Laura again as a young child, as a young girl, and watch her grow up if it's successful. But it's the rights that Friendly Family Productions has are the rights to the actual Little House on the Prairie book. So and they are the ones who control Little House on the Prairie as a trademark. So no one is going to do anything if they're not doing it, and their rights really emanate from the pages of those books that Laura wrote. So if it's going to happen, I think we're going to go back to Laura as a young girl and start over again.
Well, Dean, I want to tell you something. I was very touched by something you wrote in your book. You said, my entire life has been an ongoing quest to be seen, heard, and accepted. Dean, I want you to know that you've not only been seen, heard, and accepted, you've been respected, admired, and loved. Do you get that? I mean, deep down inside, do you get that?
I'm sure that's always a little bit of we all live in our own little world, and I step into a public world only occasionally. But I think that because of Little House and because of what it means to people, I think that we all have a place in this legacy. And I feel like my interest is to treat my place in that legacy respectfully and to honor it. And I have no inclination to do anything else but that. So that's my commitment, and it takes me where it takes me. But Harvey, I love the Little House stories. I love what they stand for. I love what they mean to people. And I certainly am incredibly grateful for what they've done for me. It has really, truly been the gift of a lifetime. So, having the opportunity to talk about it in my book, and there are some blemishes in that story, but I think it's what I'm trying to share is my truth. And I'm not saying it's anyone else's truth. It's my truth. But I thank you for your comments. You are a terrific interviewer, and you ask great questions. I really appreciate that.
Well, I got to tell you, Dean, it's been such a pleasure meeting you, having this chance to talk about your life and career. Thank you for all the great performances, for the movies and TV shows you've produced. Thank you for writing the book. And of course, most of all, thank you for taking the time to appear on our show.
Thank you, Harvey. It's been a pleasure.
Our guest has been actor, producer, director, and author Dean Butler, whose new book, Prairie Man, My Little House Life and Beyond, is now available on Amazon and wherever books are sold. You can also learn more about Dean Butler and find out about his personal appearances and everything that's happening by going to his official website, deanbutler.com. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time. Thank you to my producer, Steve Silver, my managers, Rick Marcelli and Robin Bragg Marcelli at the Marcelli Company in Hollywood, my director of programming, Robert Monaghan, my PR directors, Eileen Shapiro and Jimmy Starr, and my entire team at the XPTV1 network in the UK.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.